Welcome to Seniorship, the podcast where we discuss various aspects of aging, of retirement, of reinvention. Today's guest is Nick Ringer, someone I had met before, but a long time ago. He is a friend of one of my colleagues in the Seniorship team, Tim Arnold, and Nick is someone who changed his life in several ways, and therefore I was particularly interested to hear what he had to say about what worked for him. So let's see what Nick has to say. Nick, good morning and welcome back to the Seniorship Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Excellent.
Yes,
very well.
The sun is shining.
Is it? Okay. And you're in the sunny southwest of England, aren't you?
Yes, Torbay. So it is a very, very nice area with lots of places that you can enjoy an early morning walk, which is what I did today.
Excellent. Now, Nick, in order to get the best out of this time together, I sent you a couple of questions that I might talk to you about.
Yes.
And I thought I would do them in reverse order because we might not have time to cover them all. Because the third one is actually probably the most general one and very specific to our topic, really, because I can hear from the conversation we had before and emails we've exchanged that you've thought a lot about this whole issue of getting the most out of later years. And so I asked you a very general question in my email. I said, what advice would you give based on the changes that have happened in your life recently? What advice would you give to someone approaching retirement about how to get the most out of later years?
Well, yeah, because the word that sticks out is retirement. And retirement, how do you define retirement? If one assumes that one has had a career in whatever aspect, whatever direction and environment that career has taken, retirement is often construed as, well, that comes to an end. You leave your corporate job, you leave the NHS, you retire as a doctor. Well, what does that actually mean? It means relatively little. If you then think, well, I still have my health, and I'm happy, and they're two fundamental characteristics of life. So what can I do? Let's assume you are financially secure, or maybe not. What can I do to continue to enjoy my life, continue to be healthy and happy? And there are literally lots and lots of other opportunities that you can follow. And maybe, let's say you've had a corporate career, but you were always interested in bird watching. That came to mind. Well, what societies could I join? What equipment do I need? Where can I travel to? How can I build my social network around that point of interest? And I think a lot of people's view retirement of, well, actually, I'm not worth anything now. I'm not managing director of a company. I'm sitting at home. I play golf twice a week, but frankly, I find it boring. It's this perception of retirement is a goal that drives us through 40 odd years of our life plus. And then you get to it and you think, oh my God, what do I do now? And that was my challenge. I retired from a very successful corporate role. I was, frankly, a multi-millionaire. And I decided, well, I was very interested in wine and wine production. So, you went round on a first-class round-the-world tour, going to the finest vineyards and finest restaurants and meeting up with friends in all over the world. But once you'd done that for 2 trips, 6 months, I was bored to tears. I needed something else. And that's why, from my point of view, I had an old friend who worked with me at Rankobus McDougall, and I raised about 6.5 million and bought a business down in Cornwall, making Cornish pasties. And that was fascinating because it was a very profitable business, but the guy who ran it was an ex-butcher, very successful man, but he ran it as if it was an ice cream business because he only focused on the southwest of England. So in the winter, he lost money. In the summer, he made money. And it was a very simple strategy. Well, let's expand the coverage of distribution.
Okay.
And that's, so I recruited salespeople. I had Tim as my marketing consultant, rebranding, etc., etc. So I went back to everything I did before.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. I see. Yes.
yeah, and the fact is, I owned a significant percentage of the business. Yes, you've got to deal with venture capitalists, and they can be very difficult. And after 4.5 years, we got very good offers, 3 very good offers, and that would have actually added to my reserves significantly. But we hit the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
And all of the offers were rescinded because none of the banks would lend any money to anybody until they knew what was going to happen.
Yes.
So that was probably my biggest challenge.
Yes. Good word, challenge.
Retirement. Yeah, but I was 57, so I was still young in that context.
Yeah.
So and I don't give up. I like to be active, and I like commercial activity.
Good. That's that key word. I'm glad you said that. Active. Yes. Carry on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I then established, would you believe, a franchise business retailing with a partner that had been one of my customers, a franchise business retailing pasties. Yes. And we got involved in that. And then a friend introduced me to another person who had restaurants. And we decided that we would invest in those restaurants. Now, that was a gamble because I'm not a restaurateur. And I was misled, and that's what caused my issues, which is question number 1, I think you raised.
Yes.
And that's where we are. 3 years ago, we were pretty destitute, to be perfectly honest. And we have focused a lot on paying debt. We relocated, smaller property, Yes. Because I technically lost most of my money that I'd spent 40 years saving up. So that's by the by.
Massive change.
Yes, but I think the issue is, and my father said it, there's 2 things that are important in life, Nick: your health and your happiness. And you can't be happy if you don't have your health. No. So the thing is, you've got to actually always look at what will make you healthy. And business activity, in what I regard, makes me healthy. And as you know, I'm working in the NHS now. Well, I do about 10, 12,000 steps a day. I'm very physically and mentally active, and I enjoy the social network. It doesn't pay a lot, but it helps, and it covers quite a lot of the expenditure that we've got. Mm-hmm. So retirement, I believe, is an opportunity to be free. At the same time, what you need to do is really ask yourself, and maybe go for consultation or talk to other people who've been through it. What is it that retirement can bring you, and what are let's say, the risks of retirement? Because, some people, and I know, they sit there and they are bored because they don't have the meetings to go to, they don't have the social interaction, they're not traveling, etc. And this is not an easy time at all for people, because that's what they were focused on, driven by, rewarded by.
Yes.
And now,
yes.
What do I do now? And it's huge, I think. It was my biggest challenge, I have to say, in life. I've had some quite challenging situations.
Nick, you mentioned social interaction. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that apparently, so studies have proven, always a slow news day when a newspaper report begins that way. Studies have shown that the number 1 predictor of long life, and I mean really long life, is above diet and exercise and all those other things, and alcohol or no alcohol, is social interaction. It's social activity. Now, you moved location, didn't you, to an area you hadn't lived in before? Well, okay, you lived in the southwest in your pasty business, but I mean, how did you manage to do that change, so that were you able to recreate some sort of social network within a reasonable time?
Yeah, well, the reason why we moved down here is that my wife had a very close friend who she went to university with, who came from Torquay, went to Canterbury, University of Kent, and then came back and has been a teacher all her career until she just retired, interestingly. So she was able to network us with quite a lot of other people. And a good friend of my brother, his ex-boss lives down here, and he's been a very good social interaction. And obviously the hospital is a good social interaction. And although it's mostly online, I interact a lot with my other business, which is tobacco distribution. So I'm always Zooming, calling, etc. Now that's not face to face most of the time, but that helps. The last thing you want is to be lonely. The last thing you would want is to not have anything to do, get up and go and do something. And I think it's, a real challenge for people who might lose their partner or, have challenges physically, financially, etc. That's when, I think people really do have the challenge, which nobody wants. But, I think one of the issues here is, what do we do to train people when they are about to go into retirement? What is it? Nobody. It's a bit like when a young couple have a baby. Nobody tells them how to bring up a baby. It's probably the biggest thing in the world that they'll ever face. And it's, oh well, there you go. On try your best. And but it's almost the same challenge in retirement. And I think people, companies, organizations, the government should actually set up retirement classes. And this is one of the things that I've been thinking about. What do we do with this wonderful subject of seniorship, which, as I said in my email, is going in multiple directions? Who could we get? Sorry,
there's a background noise here. I don't know what's going on downstairs in where I'm living at the moment. It will pass. It will pass.
What can we do to attract more attention and more funding to actually get advisors to sit with people prior to retirement and then post-retirement? Because there's a lot of talent, a lot of energy, a lot of individuals that would contribute to charitable work. I've talked about the NHS, would contribute to guidance on business, etc., etc. And there's a lot of people that I know that are consultants to business organizations, universities, etc., using their fantastic skills to educate young people, students who are approaching the start of their career. And that, I think, is very stimulating for them. But we don't do anything. There's no organization to help people to retire. And it's a rather sad event, but I worked at Allied Lines, and we had retirement parties for management at 65, and the CEO would hand out the clock that they were given. It's quite interesting, time's going to go slow, so I'm going to give you a clock. And this guy was leaning forward to take it from the hands of the chairman, and he passed away. He dropped the clock. No, he dropped the clock and passed away. And interestingly, a lot of people said to me afterwards, that probably was a blessing, because he didn't have to face retirement. And it didn't register because I was only in my early 30s. But I'm thinking, well, some people.
That's a lesson.
Yes. But I think we should find ways of raising the profile of seniorship. And what to do with your health, what to do with your sort of mental state, your happiness, let's call it that. And then what can you do with your skill sets to contribute to the economic life of this country? Rather than be a drain, can you be a positive? And nobody does anything like that. It's left up to the individual. But if you wave the flag and said, come and join our organization, which might be state funded or funded by various people, come and join our organization and we will find you activity. And you might even be paid for that activity.
Yes.
You know, if you want to, and it will be 2 days a week, 2 afternoons, 3 mornings, you know, whatever it is. That's what we should be looking for, because there's a massive resource that's wasted and is wasting away.
Yes.
Sorry for me waffling on.
But no. I want you to waffle on. That's the point of waffling on is not what you're doing. That's the point of these conversations, really, Nick, because we feel that exactly as you've said, there's a massive resource of people approaching this R word, and some people call it. It's always been called retirement, and my dad looked forward to it for years and thought, oh, great, yes, I'm going to do lots of gardening now. And then some people call it reinvention, but there's this massive resource of people who've learned stuff over the years and therefore could contribute to help people who are approaching whatever you call this watershed, who are approaching it. And I once got a book out of the library about retirement planning, and it said in the introduction, most people put more thought into planning a holiday than they do into planning retirement.
Correct.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because I think they feel that they will be free, they will be secure, and they will be, let's say, stimulated in other ways, like we'll go on holiday, just like my case, you know, I want to do this. And, you know, yeah, it was fine. But, you know, in a short space of time, people think, oh, what am I doing? I'm bored with this. I've done this numerous times. You know, now what do I do? And it's almost like they'd love to phone to Rick. Nick, could you come back to work with us? We're desperately in need of your skills. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, and the social interaction at work,
yes,
is so positive. And you know, without that, you know, let's say husband and wife lived together for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever length of marriage, and then all of a sudden the husband's at home all day. Well, the wife's social network changes radically, and I think that causes a lot of problems. And I'm sure the threats to the marriage itself is increased because, well, what are you doing wandering around the house all day? You know, don't be untidy. You know, can't you do this? Can't you go out? Do you know what I mean? I'm joking, but it's a very serious conversation.
I absolutely do. A friend of mine was for years a probation officer, and she said that she dealt a lot with prisoners being released from prison. And she said, actually, men in particular retiring and suddenly being at home all the time, as you described there, is actually similar to a guy coming out of prison after 10 years in prison, and suddenly he's at home all the time, getting under his wife's feet, and he hasn't been there. And what's more, even worse, giving her advice on how to run the house.
Yes.
Very welcome, not.
I mean, I'm laughing there, but I laugh at I was thinking of some of the conversations I've had. And everybody has their space and their domain, so to speak. And the man's domain has been technically out, although, you know, that's somewhat sexist to think women are at home and men are out working.
Yeah.
But, you know, I got remarried after I came back from my various tours of the world, because we both felt that we weren't necessarily suited to one another, and I'd found somebody who was, and I'm now approaching 20 years of marriage with this lady. But she is very active commercially, very active, intellectually, and that's a stimulus as well when, you know, one partner is working and doing whatever he wants, and the other partner is doing and working whatever she wants. In some respects, retirement is it's not sort of naturally human, perhaps I should say. You know, what you're doing and what I'm doing today is keeping us going, is keeping us active. If back in Neolithic times, if we were sort of hunters, we wouldn't be sitting down not hunting. We would be out hunting and, you know, being active to keep ourselves alive. And in a funny sort of way, that's what working post-retirement or being interactive with people post-retirement is really important. I mean, my ex-wife, she's relatively wealthy, lives in a lovely house, blah, 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 but she works in a charitable foundation.
Yes.
And she said, I love it. I don't get paid, but, I know I'm doing well. She's packaging books and packages for children, packaging food. This is in Reigate. You'd think, she'd be up in the northeast or something, but no. Wealthy Reigate still has a lot of poor people that she is helping, and it really, really helps her. And this is just one small example of what people need to do. Do not stop. Keep going. It might be a different context, but keep going.
Sorry. No. I'm glad. No, listen. Your enthusiasm for the topic is terrific, actually, Nick. And let me try something on you. Have you ever seen a 3-part documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger? The reason I mention it is because he had 3 different careers, totally different careers. I mean, he was a bodybuilder, wasn't he, to begin with?
Yes.
And then he became an actor. And I don't think anybody ever thought he could be an actor, but he turned out he was pretty good, sort of comedy style. Exactly, Terminator, massive success, and then he became a politician, and it was very instructive actually. Because in particular he remembered that his father, although he'd had a very dysfunctional relationship with his father, who seemed like a strange person, his father said something that he never forgot, and what his father said was, "Be useful." Be useful. And so when they came to him in California, whatever it was, and said, listen, we want to get rid of this governor, they were having a recall motion or whatever it was to get rid of this governor, will you stand? And lots of people were saying, oh, you got no experience of this, you don't have the skills, etc., etc. He just remembered what his dad said, be useful. And what you described there about your ex-wife and about what you're doing in the hospital there in Torbay, be useful. Do you think that's a useful mantra for us older people?
I think it certainly is. Because if you're useful, you're going to be getting opportunities. You're going to, people will be interested in you. I mean, my experiences in, let's say the retirement age has all exploited or used my skills in personality, your interest in food, which is where the restaurants came from or where pasties came from. I mean, I worked for most of the UK's largest food companies in my career, and you use those qualities, interests, whatever, to keep going. And I think it's so important that people don't throw out all their skill sets of retired as if, well, they're not worth anything. No, they carry on with you. They are the building blocks of perhaps your next opportunity. I mean, Schwarzenegger was a very good governor of California. And when you look at his personality, that was one of the things that, really carried the role. Never mind his physical presence and but it was his personality that, he could be strong, he could be humorous, etc.
Yes.
So I think there's so many opportunities that, why we're talking, and I've had a long conversation with Tim, and sorry I missed that meeting that you had with Tim. I just returned from China, which was a challenge. The issue with when I was chatting to Tim is that it's sort of multifaceted, as I put in my email. The various strands of seniorship.
So many.
And we're talking about retirement, but let's talk about health. I see a lot of people in the hospital who, when I talk to them, which I enjoy doing, when I talk to them, they are, clinically at risk from overweight or diabetes or whatever. And a lot of it stems from what would after retirement, I just sat around. I ate Kit Kats, ate the wrong food, and they don't burn off the energy. These kind of things are, it's a cause of death. And you've worked all your life. Surely you should have, let's say you retire at 60, you should be looking for another 25 years, 85 perhaps, to enjoy the benefits of all of that hard work that you put in your working life. And we're not focusing in on that as well. So my perception of this subject, because I've been thinking a lot about it,
clearly you have.
It's so important, seniorship. And it's almost like, one life ends, let's say corporate life, but then a new life starts. And it's not you're going downhill and the end of, I'm not useful anymore, I'm not valued anymore. No, you are. There's so much more to do. And, I look at our friend Tim. I mean, Tim's continually active mentally.
Yes.
I wish he was a little bit more physically active and, was, because I do see him slowing down, but I had a good chat with him. But he's in his early 80s and he's certainly put the miles on and has had a very good life. But there's so much more that Tim could offer.
And does.
Yeah. How old are you, by the way, Mike?
81. I'm almost the same age as Tim. Actually, I'm a few months older than Tim, I think. 81.
Yeah. Well, we've not met physically in person.
No.
Your mental, your physical, what I can see, head and shoulders. This is archetypal of what we're trying to achieve for people, isn't it?
This is the beauty of Zoom, of course. I'm actually 25 stone, but you can't see the bottom half of me. Only kidding.
My brain.
We go back to that word active, don't we? And staying active, whether it's mentally or physically. If you can do both, that's great. I mean, I live in a retirement village here. I never thought I would do it, but I do, and I love it here. And one of the things that they really focus on here is opportunity for activity. So, for example, there's a gym, there's a pool, and in the gym, there's a gym manager who runs courses. Some of them free, but most of them, some of them chargeable, but a lot of them included in what we pay here, and so courses that keep you active, and this is terrific. So that word active, so mental and physical. Can I bring you on to what the second question on that email I sent you, which was if someone came to you and said, Nick, I'm thinking of retirement, but I'm wondering whether I will have enough money, because a lot of people, when they think about this R word, retirement, they think, oh gosh, I wonder if I can afford it. Now, what advice would you give someone approaching retirement about how to calculate whether they have enough money? Or is there any advice you can give?
Yes, I think certainly. Obviously, depends on the individual circumstances, but let's say somebody is retiring on a very modest pension. Let's say they own their property and they own their car. So the big then again, it goes back, and I wrote it down. It's health and happiness, what is important. You don't have to go out to eat 6 times a week. You don't have to have expensive holidays or go to the theatre once a month. Just budget what you need. And it might well be that you don't buy processed food or ready meals. You actually get into a cooking regime and you cook from scratch, which is incredibly stimulating, and there's a lot of activity, etc. It's from our own point of view, you don't need a lot to actually have a happy, healthy life. And it's so often, let's say somebody has worked for 30, 40 years, they're going to have retired with something in the pot. They're going to get a state pension, albeit that's minimal these days. But what else do I need? What do I need? I need my health and I need my happiness. Yes. And if you focus on that and you just get a list of, well, I spend X on food, X on, let's say, a couple of bottles of wine a week, petrol, insurances, well, add it all up, that might be £1,000. Well, a month. Well, so what? You've got that, and you've got 2 or 3 times more coming in. Yeah. But if you don't have your health, then you really are in difficulties. Yeah. And all the money in the world can't buy you your health.
No, it can't. But I mean, you mentioned something actually there, cooking from scratch, and maybe that's a thing we need to develop in a future conversation, Nick, which is one of the chefs who lives in this country, Giorgio Locatelli, years ago, he said that he really regretted the fact that in British schools, kids are not taught to cook anymore. And he says so many health problems could be avoided. The obesity problem, we're one of the worst countries in Europe for obesity, are we not?
Yes.
You, working in the NHS, you see it. You're at the sharp end there. The obesity and diabetes and what have you. He said if people were taught, well, learning or relearning, should we say, if you learnt it before, or learning to cook from scratch again, it's more economical, and B, it's healthier. So that's something that maybe we should look at. I'm so glad to say, and I'm rambling a bit here, I'm so glad to say here in this retirement village, we have a chef who runs cookery masterclasses once a week.
Yes.
Different topics.
Excellent.
Great
Excellent.
idea.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think, we seem to have distanced ourselves from perhaps some of the principles that we grew up with. My father had a garden, there was fruit trees, he grew vegetables. Mother made jam from the fruit, bottled the fruit, cooked and baked, all from scratch, which, was very, very healthy. And obviously we went on bikes, we weren't driven to school, we walked to school, and all that kind of lifestyle in 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s, yes.
Yeah, now, our next door neighbours, she's got 3 young kids. They eat McDonald's, and it's very nice. And I will enjoy a McDonald's once a quarter, maybe. If I'm travelling up to see Tim or whatever, I'll have a sausage, egg muffin and a coffee. That's it. But the issue is some people rely on that continuously
all the time.
Every day. And I think, again, it goes back to, what we're slightly deviating because we're talking about younger people, but as we go into retirement, we've got to look at what makes us healthy and what makes us happy. And we have to have activity mentally and physically. And we have to get the social interaction and the sort of the happiness swirl of linking people together and talking to people. So go out there to join maybe some club that you've been interested in, go to a cookery school, go to the gym. Tim goes to the gym.
He does, yes.
That's absolutely excellent. And it's all these kind of things that you need to have in your life. Otherwise, you are going to wither away. I am sorry to say.
Hey, listen, you mentioned something interesting in your email to Tim after you'd visited him.
Well, it was to you. I'm sorry I addressed it to Tim. It was just following a conversation.
No. Well, no, you sent me a copy. And you said something like this. You said we shouldn't just assume that horrible word that word retirement happens at a certain age, 65, because depending on what your job was, you might retire much, much earlier than that. So, for example, if you had a career in the military or the police, you may retire earlier. I once trained as a retirement coach, actually, and I learned, of course, what I should have realized before, that in some fields, for example, if you're an elite sports person, which of course I have been in my time, not. If you're an elite sports person or you're a performer on stage and screen and that sort of thing, you've got to consider reevaluating your life much, much earlier than 65.
Yeah. Yes. Well, police, they work for 20 years and then they can retire.
Yes.
So, and on full pension, which seems a little bit extreme, but so somebody joined at 18, at 38 they've retired.
Well, but as you rightly said, having a decent pension is not the whole answer, is it? Having enough money is not the whole answer.
No. And I think when I look at various friends of mine who've gone through corporate life and have, retired extremely comfortably, I Zoom with them, and one lives in Belgium, and they have a place in Morocco which they go to. It's not like they have the happiest life that's coming forward. It's comfortable, but it doesn't seem that there's a lot of stimulation.
Exactly.
Whereas when I'm actually going into my workplace, or when I have my tobacco business, etc., you get challenges, and you have to solve the problem, and I'm ringing the States, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. That's sort of, to me, I can't let go of that dynamic.
Good.
Whereas my friend, we go for a walk in the village, and we meet up with friends, and we have a coffee, and then we'll go out for dinner with friends. It's very, very, very nice life. And he was my best man at my first wedding, and we went to college together. So I've known him for 50 odd years. And he's a great guy, but I don't get the sense of stimulus. And I think that's what we need.
You've proved something. You proved something absolutely there. Number one, of course, we're all different, and so what works for him, well, we hope it works for him anyway, wouldn't work for you, wouldn't work for me. But some key words that I picked up from this last few minutes here, which is stimulus, activity, and challenge. And you know what? I think, why don't we? I'm going to listen back to the recording of this, and I'll send you a copy of the recording, by the way. But what I'd like to do is have another session with you, maybe in a month's time, whatever, and develop those three words, stimulus, challenge, and change. Because people used to say, didn't they? There are only two things that are certain, and that's death and taxes. But there is a third one, which is change. And so things are going to change. And I think what I picked up from you is that we need to have the opportunity. We need to look for the opportunity to control the change for our own benefit. So can I wrap it up at that point, Nick?
Yes,
and say,
that's fine.
Thank you very much for your time. And thank you very much for your time. I will send you a copy of the recording, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you, Nick.
Mate. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All the best.
Bye.